get started. All right. Hi, we're going to get started now, and others can join as we move through our webinar. I wanted to let you know that you can at any point type in questions, which we'll all be able to see, and then I can incorporate answers to the presentation as we go through it. So welcome. I hope your days at work and your summer jobs were good, and thanks for hanging in there until 5 o'clock. I expect we'll be done in about an hour, and of course afterwards, if you have other questions that don't come up or you don't think of them today, you can always email me or give me a call. So we're going to be going through the PowerPoint that you see in front of you, and it is also uploaded on our web page for the fellowships and public interest job search pages. So in those two areas, you'll see this PowerPoint as well. So why Fellowship Bootcamp? As some of you may know, Fellowship Bootcamp is what we call a four-part process through which we really try to help everyone who's thinking about fellowships put together an application and be sure they get them. We want to be sure that you know how to navigate the process, that you feel confident in your outreach and planning. We want to be sure that you have feedback and support from the fellowship committee, from CPP, and from TPIC. Ultimately, we're hoping that it helps you get fellowships and that the process itself is easier along the way. Give me a moment. I have a message from a student having trouble getting in. And Rick, you can let me know if you didn't get that message. I just sent it to you by email. And so getting back to our fellowships. So there's two types of fellowships. When we look at them and we think about them, we categorize them in two broad groups. The first are organization-based fellowships. These are fellowships where the organization itself is sponsoring and providing funds for law graduates to work with them for a specific period of time and or on a specific project. Many organizations have their own fellowship processes. I've included a few examples here. If you open up the PowerPoint on the web pages where they are, where the PowerPoint is listed or housed right now, you'll be able to link to the different fellowships. Are there any questions about any of these specific fellowships as we move from organization-based? Give me 1 second. I see that. Okay, great. So Rick is taking care of the other student who wants to join us. Sorry for the distraction. The MALDEF Fellowship is a great question. My understanding is it's based out of New York, and you can take a look at its site to see whether there is a possibility of doing it in other locations. The thing with organization-based fellowships is that they have a unique set of skills that they will require. So you are essentially coming on as a staff attorney at their organization, and you may be expanding on the work they're doing or continuing the work that is being done there, but it's a specific funding to get usually a younger attorney in. They will often want a personal statement, letters of reference, and you can look for them on Simplicity, and you can also look for them on psjd.org. And you'll hear me say this a couple of times in this webinar. psjd.org is the biggest repository of both organization-based fellowships and the next type that we are about to talk about, which are project-based fellowships. So next we move to project-based fellowships, and you just saw me motioning. That's because Arlene Rivera-Finkelstein is joining us in case there are questions that she can help us answer. So project-based fellowships are those where there are two steps to the process. In order to become a fellow, you would first partner with a host organization, and then next, after you have gone through that process and you and the host organization have put together a proposal or a project, you would then apply to foundations, law schools, firms, whoever is subsidizing the project-based fellowships in order to be able to do the work that is in your project. A couple of things to keep in mind. Not only are you going to be in partnership with a nonprofit, you have to be sure that you can show you meet a social or environmental need. Many of them do allow people to apply and come into the fellowships if they are coming out of clerkships, but you want to be sure you read the specific limitations of the funder's fellowship requirements to make sure that you fit within the subject matter and the time limitations. So some examples of project-based fellowships that you may have all heard of already: Skadden, Independence, EJW, Equine Green, Soros Justice, and we will be talking about most of them during the course of this webinar. So if your questions come up as we're talking about them, feel free to ask, but we're going to do some more general overview right now. So project-based fellowships, subject matter that you're passionate about. You want to find organizations that do work in the area that you want to work in. You want to be sure that you understand the client base you will be serving and the issue. And you want to be looking at the funders and their requirements along with looking at the organizations that are working on the issue. In terms of choosing an organization to work with, you want to be sure that there's a real fit. And that fit has to be both in terms of the kind of work that you want to do and what the organization's culture is like. Sorry, I'm distracted because I'm seeing the student is still having trouble getting in. So when you're thinking about what the organization is like, you want to be looking at whether or not the organization is doing new and innovative things, whether the organization is looking more for a fellow who will extend their ongoing work. And then you want to see whether your desire to do the work fits into one of those categories that fits with what the particular funder wants. Some of the project-based fellowship funders will want innovative approaches and new and different ideas for solving social justice problems. But then there are other providers such as Skadden and EJW that are happy to see you doing what is an extension of their ongoing work. In the course of putting together your project-based fellowship, you want to make sure that you're maintaining communication with all parties. You have to understand that you're going to be revising your project proposal many, many times and that it will evolve. And you want to be open-minded to ideas from particularly the organization that you're hoping will be your partner organization or host organization. And you also want to really be open to the ideas of experts in the field. And you'll see some of my formatting was changed here when they uploaded this on Adobe Connect. It changed some of my formatting, but it's all still readable. So in terms of finding a partner organization, you want to make sure that you mark the key dates for each partner organization's deadline. And that means the date by which they want every graduate or 3L student who's interested in working with them and working with them to submit fellowship applications and proposals to submit their idea for a draft proposal. So it's a two-step process. You're going to be making sure that you get the first deadlines and you meet all of those. And then if the partner organization chooses you, you would be applying with them and putting a project together with them to submit to Skadden, EJW, Soros Justice, or one of the other project-based fellowship providers. Any questions at this point? So you want to make sure that you learn about the organization. Obviously, you want to know the organization's mission and goals, but you also want to know the culture of the organization. Is there a formal or informal hierarchy? What is the history of the organization? What are some of the other projects that they're working on? What is the nature of the work that they do? Are they mostly doing impact litigation? Are they mostly doing direct service? Are they currently, for the subject area you want to work on, just doing policy work? And you also want to look at the potential areas of growth within that organization. To some extent, you could say that you want to be looking at them as a place that you would want to be a staff attorney in the future. And you want to be looking at whether the fit works with your work style, your interests, and your goals. For the project itself, what you need are a client base, obviously. and a particular legal issue. And in breaking down the legal issue, you want to be sure that you have an understanding of what your goals would be and what your outcomes would be in trying to resolve the particular issue for that client base through legal means. And you need both short-term and long-term goals. But they should be realistic ones, and you want to ensure that the organization provides you with strong supervision and mentorship for meeting those goals, and that you have a very realistic timeline within which you can meet the short-term goals. You do want to be thinking about the sustainability of one or more pieces of your project beyond the period of your fellowship. In terms of contacting alumni and other fellowship recipients, this is a necessary component of your application. You have to be sure that you communicate with CPP and TPIC to know who the list of contacts are. You need to make sure that you reach out to former recipients who have similar backgrounds or who have worked with similar client populations. And you need to seek the feedback from the fellowship team. So the fellowship team includes Professor Kara Fink, Professor Lou Ruley, Professor Sarah Paoletti, Arlene Finkelstein, Heather Fertone, and myself. And remember that the conversations, emails, and follow-ups that you are conducting in order to put your proposal together are really all part of your application. When you contact alumni or other past fellowship recipients, you want to be ready. You want to be prepared when you do that. Make sure you've done some research on the alumnus and you understand the work that they did. You want to be sure that you can show that you are passionate about the work that you want to do and the community that you want to serve. And ask them for guidance, but be sure you're prepared with some specific questions to make sure that that conversation is a fruitful one. And be sure you introduce who you are and why you're interested in the fellowship really clearly. In terms of applying both for fellowships and clerkships, you can do this, but you want to make sure that you have really clear communication with the organization you're working with at all times. And you want to make sure that if you do apply for an organization-based fellowship, it's one that you can withdraw from in the event that you get a clerkship along the way. And I see that the other students have been able to join us. Thank you for that, Rick. So for organization-based fellowships, you can let them know that you are also in the midst of applying for clerkships and that you may be withdrawing. Now, the timing of doing that and the nature, the way that you would do that is something that you can talk to us about before you do it. Grades. So grades are given weight. Some fellowships give grades more weight than others. As you may know, Skadden gives weight. Gives a good deal of weight to grades, but good, it worked. In addition to grades, you need to really be able to show to the fellowship funders your commitment to the client base, your practical experience, which can come in many forms, your application as a whole, and the fact that the project is a really well-conceived one. It should be a project that incorporates long-term goals, some measure of sustainability beyond the period of the fellowship as well. And finally, you need to show that you, as a whole applicant, all of you are the person and the right person to put this project into place and make it work. When you're preparing for interviews for project-based fellowships, you want to be sure that you really know the project and proposal inside and out, better than anyone. You want to be sure you know the clients, the community, have an understanding of your sponsor organization. Again, that would have been some of the research you would have done in choosing the organization along the way. So the history, the mission, the structure, the projects that they're working on that are only related to yours, areas of growth within the organization. And you want to be ready for panel interviews and small group interviews. And for each interview, you really want to be able to show why you're motivated to do that particular work and why you want that particular fellowship. Why is that fellowship the best vehicle for you to be able to get that work done? Any questions at this point? Okay. Equal Justice Works. Its deadline is September 17th. The application is online and you can begin, starting yesterday, you can begin submitting that application. And interviews are in November, and they continue through April. Interviews can be as late as February, and the offers are made on a rolling basis. So Equal Justice Works funds legal advocacy on behalf of disenfranchised individuals or groups, or legal advocacy in issues that are not adequately represented by our legal system. So you can introduce new services or a meaningful expansion of services that are already provided by the nonprofit legal services organization. But you do want to be addressing the needs of individuals or communities in the U.S. or its territories. So law school graduates, outgoing judicial law clerks, and graduates from the last 5 years can apply to EJW. And the unique things about EJW are the way that they fund. EJW is not the direct funder. It is the source for organizing all of the fellowship applications and setting up interviews with those who are the direct funders. You can take a look at who has funded projects in their annual reports on their website. And you want to be sure that you have networked with prior recipients of EJW fellowships before you submit your application. And you want to be sure that you talk to us about how you reach out to EJW themselves about specific questions that you may have regarding your project and your potential funders. And you want to remember, because, for example, a law firm may be funding a particular type of EJW fellowship, and you might be in the running, you might be of interest to them, and your project may be of interest to them, the organization you're partnering with will also have a role in networking EJW fellowships. Right, so I should clarify that. So nonprofit that you may, that you're partnering with may have worked with the firm or may know folks at the firm. They may also know people at EJW, so they will have a role in doing that network. It's an essential part of your application. So EJW is great because they have sample applications on their website. You can also ask alumni and the organization about what is a good way to put together an application for EJW. And of course, you can ask us. We have on the webpage quick tips on project-based interview questions. We also have on the webpage EJW's 2013 interview questions. Both are worth looking at. If you have any problems finding those, you can let me know and I'll send you the link. Understand that your application materials when you apply to EJW are going to be reviewed by a variety of funders. So, for example, a variety of law firms that may have an interest in funding women's rights issues will be looking at your application if you happen to put together a project about women's rights. As a result, you may have more than one interview. So if you have an interview with an EJW representative and a representative of the interested funding source, let's say Firm 1, you may also have another interview with Firm 2 because it also has some interest in funding your work. What you need to know then is what the nuances, the differences are in what the two firms might be wanting to do, and that will help you prepare for each of those interviews. Any questions at this point? Okay. Independence Foundation. Oh, Arlene, anything you want to add about EJW? Independence Foundation. The deadline is September 24th. They would like hard copies. You can hand deliver them, or they need to receive them in the mail. They make their offers in mid-December. Independence Foundation is, we're lucky to have them as a funding source, and the foundation really is centered on enhancing direct representation and services, legal services to disadvantaged clients in our area. So Philadelphia, Delaware, Montgomery, Bucks, and Chester counties. You can take a look at a list of recipients and their organizations, and you want to start networking with regional civil legal service organizations in order to think about partnering with one of them to apply for Independence Foundation. Is there a project-based fellowship like Independence in New York? That's a great question. I don't know that there's one specific to New York. There are many organization-based fellowships in New York. So, Nina, if you and I talk about subject areas, we could do some research and point you to the specific subject area organization-based fellowships. Do you know of a regional New York?
I don't know of any in New York. I know that New York organizations have sponsored our fellows through SCADN or EJW.
Okay. I see that Nina's typing, so I'm going to give her a second. Okay, great. So independence, the key is that you want to have your partner organization be from this area, but you also want to show your own connection to improving social justice needs and meeting social justice needs in our area. So networking with regional organizations is a very important part of understanding who would be best for you to put a proposal together with and submit to Independence Foundation with. You can apply to Independence Foundation as a law school graduate, as an outgoing judicial clerk. You can also apply if you are less than 5 years out of law school and you're currently employed. And you need to be seeking to do direct civil legal services work in order to be qualified to be considered for an Independence Foundation Fellowship. Networking specifically within Penn, you want to be sure you speak to Professor Ruley because he is a former Independence Foundation board member. You want to also be sure you speak to Professor Paoletti. She's a former Independence Fellow. You want to get feedback from former fellows as well. And I have a couple of names of fellows here for you. So in their applications, Independence Foundation is looking for a commitment to Philadelphia's communities, as I said, to legal issues and advocacy and clients in this area. And the interview for Independence Foundation is very intense. You can have up to 15 panelists, and there are going to be rapid fire questions that are very detailed about your project. We have on the web page, as I said before, quick tips on project-based interview questions. You also want to schedule mocks with us, and you really want to prepare for this interview process so that you are not taken out of the running simply because you were not expecting the interview structure that they have. How was Paoletti able to do Independence and SCADN? Is it possible to do multiple fellowships? And Nina, don't say sorry for all the questions. That's great, because then I can take a break and actually make sure I'm responding to what people want to know. You can apply to multiple fellowships. They don't all allow it, but so long as you meet the criteria for the fellowship application, you can, in fact, apply. So, for example, Independence allows you to apply if you are less than 5 years out and currently employed, and you want to do direct civil legal services work. And you could be doing all of that while you are a SCADN fellow.
And more specifically, just to add, there was an intervening judicial clerkship for Professor Paoletti, which is how she was able to navigate both of the fellowships. For the SCADN fellowship, as long as you're coming out of a clerkship, you would be eligible. So in her case, she was able to literally stagger both fellowships with one clerkship in between.
Okay.
And just to answer the previous question about New York, because there are two specific programs that might be of interest to any New Yorkers. They're not project-based fellowships, though. One is they developed a special immigration fellowship program last year. It was just launched with the first fellows taking their positions this coming fall. And that's a new program specifically for folks who want to do immigrant rights advocacy in New York. There's also a pretty cool Empire State Fellows program that is not exclusively legal. There's a variety of different kinds of positions for folks who are very committed to New York. And it's something worth looking at. Again, not a project-based fellowship, but something worth looking at for those of you who are committed to working in New York.
And there are also fellowships funded at NYU, but open to other applicants. I mean, as you begin to do the research in New York, you will find there are many fellowship possibilities, which is why subject area is the best way to start that research. But again, most of them are going to be organization-based, whereas independence is for our region, but it is project-based and allows you to shape your own project. And yes, the webinar is being recorded. And Megan, since you missed the beginning, I said at the beginning that this PowerPoint is actually up on our web pages, both on the fellowships page, and I think the other page is called the Public Interest Job Search page, but it will be recorded as well. And Megan, as we go, you can be sure, or just feel free to type in any other questions you may have. All right. So we did independence, and we've started talking about Skadden now. So Skadden's due date is October 6th. Your application begins with your first conversation with Susan Butler-Plum or any former Skadden fellow. No need to get your application in early. That does not help. They get a plethora of applications. You just want to be sure that your application is the best that it can possibly be. Their interviews are in late November, and their offers are December 5th. What kind of projects do they fund? They fund legal services to the poor, including the working poor. So the federal poverty limit is not the limit for the clients that you would serve. And they also fund services for the elderly, the homeless, and the disabled, and those deprived of their civil or human rights. Law graduates and law clerks, judicial law clerks, can apply. In terms of networking pre-application, you want to be sure you, again, talk to Professor Paoletti. Also talk to Professor Fink. As I mentioned earlier on, they are both part of the fellowship committee. You want to talk to Skadden Fellows, current and past. You can take a look at the public interest in government alumni on the public interest pages on our website. I'm working on updating that alumni list now. You can also look on the alumni directory, or really you can just contact Arlene or I, and we can send you the names of specific fellows that you can reach out to. You also, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, with Skadden in particular, you shouldn't limit your inquiry to our own alums, although that's a great place to start. One of the things that will frequently come up in a conversation with Susan Butler-Plum is that you should communicate with other Skadden fellows who have done similar projects or similar work. Right. So a really important step is making sure you check the Skadden website, which is excruciatingly well organized, so that you could see who has, and every fellow forever is listed along with a brief description of their project, and you could see fellows who have done similar work, whether it's in the city you're going to work with, the organization you're proposing to partner with, or just substantively similar. And it's expected that you do that research and that you are familiar, and reaching out to those individuals, if you can access that fellow, is great, but sometimes that's one of the many things you ask Susan Butler-Plum about is if it would be possible to get contact information for those individuals.
And that raises a really good point that I want to reiterate. As we said in the beginning, you want to be researching the organization. You want to be researching people who have worked on that issue. And you want to be thinking about those who understand that fellowship process, but you also want to be looking at those who aren't just alums that you can reach out to, but those who have worked in that subject area. So how to be the best possible candidate for that fellowship is part of the work you have to do, but also how to put together the best possible project to meet the needs of that community. So yeah, that's a really good point, that both are pieces of what you're doing in terms of your networking, outreach, and designing your project. When you consider talking to Susan Butler-Plum to ask her about how to reach out to potentially those who have gotten Skadden fellowships in the past and worked in similar subject areas, just be sure you speak to us a little bit so we can think through and be strategic about that communication with Susan Butler-Plum. Any questions at this point? So Skadden Fellowship, as I mentioned before, they do look at grades, though grades aren't the end of the analysis. They're also looking for maturity and commitment to the clients. And for Skadden Fellowships, we have quick tips on on project-based interviews on our web pages, and this is a must. It will help you prepare for all of your other interviews as well, but particularly for Skadden, you want to be sure that you're prepared to answer all of those questions. And then you should also keep in mind that in addition to project-based fellowships that are from outside the university, there are also fellowships that are funded in one way or another by Penn Law and alumni. Penn Law Fellowships is the first category that we're going to talk about. We anticipate having 3 to 5 Penn Law Fellowships, which would begin funding in September of 2015. They include the Langer-Grogan, the Penn Law Public Interest Fellowship, the Toll Public Interest Fellowship, the University of Pennsylvania Law Review Public Interest Fellowship. They may also include another fellowship, but at this point we anticipate having 3 to 5 of those. And the fellowships have a later application and interview period, as you see, February, March. The interviews are in March, and offers are generally made in April. Penn Law Fellowships fund public interest, direct services, impact litigation, and policy work. They are for 3Ls and recent graduates. And you do want to network with previous Penn Law Fellows and ask us about them. Because the application period is a little later, you can be thinking about the other national project-based fellowships first and the Independence Fellowship first, and the Penn Law Fellowships can come later. Also funded through or connected with the University of Pennsylvania are Catalyst grants. Catalyst grants are meant to be a way to begin work in the government sector. That can include either civil government work or prosecution work or public defender work. So you're not doing a special project when you put together your Catalyst grant application, but rather vying for a staff attorney position at the organization, the public defender, prosecutor, or government organization, and you would have up to 12 months of funding through the Catalyst grant for that work. And the idea is that it would eventually lead to your being able to do that work in your career. So it should be a stepping off point for work in that area. You can apply as a 3L, recent graduates can apply, and also you can simultaneously apply for Catalyst grants and Penn Fellowships. And the timelines, again, are a little bit later, March and April. Also connected to Penn, funded by an alumnus, is the ACE Rule of Law Human Rights First Fellowship. The deadline for that is a little bit earlier. It's along the lines of some of these national and the Independence Fellowship that we talked about. The deadline is September 30th. Offers are made by January. In the intervening period, they have interviews. And I have a link here to give you more details about that fellowship opportunity. But essentially, it is a fellowship that provides you the ability to work with human rights first for a year. You're eligible if you are within 3 years of graduation, and they do require a demonstrated commitment to human rights. So post-graduation, in that 2 or 3 period during which you're still eligible, you may have gone into the private sector and they actually find that experience valuable, but you have to continue to show your commitment to human rights work, whether it's through pro bono work or activity in bar associations. And certainly during your law school period, you need to be able to show a commitment to human rights work. And it is international human rights work, but it can be human rights work that includes rights of immigrants who are in this country as well. Other fellowship funders, there are a variety of other project-based fellowships. So ACE Rule of Law was an organization-based fellowship funded through a Penn Law alumnus. And you would be at Human Rights First, and we're switching back now to project-based fellowships, which are funded by the organization itself. So there isn't an intervening funder. And these include, for example, Aspen New Voices, Soros Justice, the ABA tax section has a fellowship, which is really interesting. You can also look at fellowship funding through Echoing Green. Echoing Green emphasizes funding for innovative and entrepreneurial approaches to solving legal problems. As I said before, the place to find the most complete list of fellowships, both project-based and organization-based, is psjd.org. And idealist.org has a number of them as well, but the biggest list is at psjd.org. When you look on PSJD, you want to just do a search within the jobs for fellowship sponsor, and that should narrow down your list. The listing of fellowships they have separately with rolling deadlines and such, that doesn't seem to get updated very often. So you want to just do a search within the open job positions.
Just to add a little bit on the series of fellowships you just heard about, the notable distinction for Penn Law Fellowships, as opposed to most of the other national fellowships you've heard about, is that Penn Law Fellowships are one-year fellowships, whereas Skadden, Equal Justice, Independence are two-year fellowships.
That's a good point.
Just to keep that in mind. And for Echoing Green, which was just mentioned, our new resident expert is Joanna Visser,
right.
Joyan, who just successfully went through that extremely competitive process, which is wonderful to have that resource available.
Yes, absolutely, because it's so recent as well. In terms of potential fellowship sponsors, project-based fellowships, some of the deadlines have passed. I think yesterday CLS's deadline passed, but there are numerous other organizations that are still open to getting applications from people who want to partner with them to submit a project-based fellowship application to Skadden, EJW, Independence, Soros, or Echoing Green, or one of the others. And they include, for example, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund in New York, as well as the ACLU of New Jersey, the Disability Rights and Education Fund in California, Brooklyn Legal Services, obviously in Brooklyn. So there are many still left that you could apply for. All right. Other public interest opportunities to be on the lookout for are, for example, AmeriCorps. You can also consider the Fulbright and Theron fellowships. There's also a fellowship through Building Excellent Schools. Interestingly, they just signed up for OCI. And the deadline to sign up for OCI is tonight, but they are interviewing for that fellowship through OCI. And that's just a recent development. You want to consider potential clinical positions. So we mentioned at the beginning that organization-based fellowships include two through Georgetown. One was the Women's Law Policy Initiative. The other was the Prettyman Fellowship. But you can also be considering clinical positions that are available at different universities as a way to do public interest work. Of course, psjd.org is your database for open positions that allow you to do other kinds of public interest work as well. And finally, we're here to help. Notice on this next slide, we have some dates for you. So the Fellowship Committee is an integral part of making sure that your application is as good as it can be. We not only provide suggestions for shaping the fellowship, but we're also doing individual reviews of resumes and proposals. August 29th at 5 p.m. is the student deadline for submitting draft proposals. September 4th from 4 to 6 p.m. is when committee members will meet with students to talk about their applications, and we'll do some Q&A and really explore what the proposals look like. And mock interviews will be conducted as needed in the fall. So in terms of what's going on with our Fellowship Bootcamp, this webinar is a part of it. Our one-on-one counseling with you is a part of it, but it continues with being able to reach out to the committee members one-on-one, also have them review your resumes and proposals if you get them in by August 29th, and then have them meet with you September 4th to take a look at where your draft proposals are and do some Q&A, and then conduct mock interviews with you later in the fall. Any questions about that?
I would just add that for anyone who will not physically be at the school at the time of the boot camp, we can do just remote review of your applications, and we can set up mocks via Skype or by phone if necessary.
And if you have any additional questions, feel free to contact Arlene or myself. I know she and I have spoken to several of you already, which is great that you're started on the process, and we're happy to continue those conversations and start new ones as we get you prepared for the most successful fellowship application process possible. All right, thanks everyone. I'll wait another minute or two in case there are other questions. Anything else you want to add, Arlene?
Yeah. Thanks for participating, everybody. Glad you're all thinking about it, and we look forward to working with all of you.
All right. Doesn't look like we have any other questions at this point. Of course, if you think of other questions, just let us know, and I will be turning off this meeting place at this point then. Thanks, everyone.